Hello everybody, it's Teacher Jiang, and today I want to talk about how much money you can make teaching in China. When you look at how much money you're making in China, there are a couple of things that you need to consider overall. So first thing is your overall salary package. If you look at your contract, there are 4 key things that you need to look for. First one is the salary. How much is your monthly salary? Now, is it before tax or after tax? That would, again, significantly have a difference in what you actually get paid at the end of the month. Second thing that you need to consider is your accommodation allowance. Now, some schools, they will provide you with the accommodation. So you just live in the assigned accommodation, either outside the school or maybe you'll be living in the boarding section of the school. Or some school, they provide you actual allowance every month so that you can look for your own apartments around the school. Number 3, you need to consider is your flight or travel allowance. Most schools will provide X amount of RMB so you can pay for your flight to go back home once a year. Again, the range would differ. Some schools will either pay out the unused travel allowance at the end of your contract cycle. Whereas some schools will say you either use it or lose it policy. So you're kind of sort of forced to use it. And when you do use them, some schools say that you have to use that to fly back to your home country where your passport belongs to. Or some schools will allow you to use that allowance to travel anywhere else or within China or internationally. They will just cover the cost to the X amount. Number 4, you need to consider is the medical insurance. Obviously, the school has to provide you medical insurance for the visa purposes. But difference is what kind of coverage you're going to get. Is there like a standard coverage or full comprehensive coverage? How much is the copay? Is it 50-50, 90-10, or is it 100%? So you don't have to pay a cent. Look into what insurance that you get covered for your salary package. There are other things that you do need to consider when looking at your contract. I'll make another videos about small details that you can consider when working in a training center or in an international school. Now, in terms of how much money you actually make in China, again, another thing that varies is from city to city. If you're working on a top tier city like Shanghai, Beijing, Guangdong, Shenzhen, you're kind of on the high end of the scale. Whereas if you're working in the regional cities and the tier 3 cities in China, you're kind of on the lower end of the scale. But again, don't worry, don't always look into working in big cities. Even though you might be on the higher end of the scale, your cost of living is expensive, your rent is super expensive. You're unlikely to save a lot of money working in a tier 1 city. But if you're working in the regional cities, even though you're on the lower end of the scale, the cost of living is so much cheaper, rent is so much cheaper, and you'll still be able to save quite a lot of money, even you're working in a regional city. With that in mind, I'll give you some examples of how much I've been making working in China, so it can give you some comparison and baseline on what to look for when you're looking for a job in China as well. Back in 2013, about more than 10 years ago, when I first came to China, I worked in a training center in a tier 3 city. It's a regional city. It's about 1 hour train ride from Shanghai. My initial salary at that time was about 6,500 RMB a month. And accommodation was provided by the training center. Flight allowance was about 8,000 RMB a year. And the school paid out any unused allowances that I have at the time as well. Comparing now, obviously that is not a lot. That's still very, very low end of the scale. But at that time, if you compare the average local salary for Chinese people, which was about 3,000 RMB a month, I was getting more than double the local standard. So it was okay. And at the time, I didn't come to China to sort of live and save money. I came to also originally planning to come for 1 or 2 years and make some money, live and learn Chinese and just move on to another country. But hey, I ended up staying here for more than 10 years. But that's how I started all those years ago, 6,500 RMB. 8,000 RMB accommodation, 8,000 RMB travel allowance, and accommodation, studio apartment accommodation provided by the school. And of course, the medical insurance. Through the years, I've been at the training center at the Tier 3 city for about 6 or 7 years. And I'm not sure how much salary increase I got every year, but by the time I left, I was on about like 12 or 13,000 RMB a month. Same travel allowance and same accommodation allowance. There wasn't a big increase in salary or huge gap, so I was kind of on the lower end of the scale, working in a Tier 3 city. And another reason is because I'm Asian, Chinese looking. There's a whole spectrum of not native versus non-native speakers, white versus non-white teachers. I'll do another video explain how that affects your teaching in China and your salary package. But for now, that's how much money I was making in teaching in training center. Now, if you are working in training centers in China, I think the salary range will be anywhere between 15,000 RMB to maybe 25,000 RMB. Again, this would depend on which city you are working in, and also your qualification that you may have. Maybe you just have a TEFL certificate. Maybe you have a master's in education. Maybe you have a teaching license. So these would affect how much salary you're going to get at the end. And the accommodation allowance will differ from city to city as well. That's the sort of range you're looking at working in a training center. 15,000 to 25,000 RMB, plus your accommodation allowance and your flight allowance as well. Now, working in an international school, your pay scale kind of goes up significantly, from my experience anyway. I think for the international school, your salary range will be anywhere between 20,000 RMB all the way up to 40,000 RMB. That will depend on your location you're working in and whether you are a licensed teacher or not. That's a huge one. The current school I'm working in, I started on a 29,000 RMB when I started working at this school. 29,000 RMB a month before tax. I got about 8,000 RMB accommodation allowance because the housing rental prices around the property school was quite expensive, so school matched the market value. And my flight travel allowance was about 12,000 RMB a year. This one, I don't get paid out. I had to either use it or lose it, which incentivized me to actually travel or use the allowance every year. And they give you full comprehensive insurance as well. Back to the salary, I started with 29,000 RMB at my current school. But from what I can tell, if you don't have your UK QTS or any other teaching licenses, your salary probably starting salary will be about 25,000 RMB. Because I have my QTS, UK teaching license, I was able to get a higher starting salary base rate. That's it's about 5,000 RMB difference in pay rate whether you have a license, teaching license or not. Currently, I've been working at the school my current school for about 5 years now. And my current salary is around 36,000 RMB a month. So basically, it's on average, I get about 1,000 RMB increase every year that I stay, which is not a lot, but still is something. I'm currently on about 36,000 RMB a month, plus the same accommodation allowance and same travel allowance. The only difference between my training center and my international school is that with my current school, they also provide travel allowance for my family members. So I get 12,000 RMB a month travel allowance for myself. I also get the 12,000 RMB travel allowance for my wife. And I get about 5,000 RMB amount for each of my children to use towards my flight allowance, which helps me a lot, especially if you have a family and you want to go back to see your family back home and you got wife and kids. Those things really do help. To summarize, training centers, I think you're gonna get about 15,000 to 25,000 RMB a month. Whereas in the international school, you're expected to get anywhere between 20,000 RMB to 40,000 RMB a month. This is all depending on whether you have a teaching license or not, what kind of qualification you have, and the city that you work in. Accommodation allowance varies a lot. In my training center days, initially they offered the accommodation for me, but then I opted to get an allowance instead. And they gave me about 2,000 RMB allowance, which was a market value at the time in the tier 3 city I was working at. Whereas my current school, they offer 8,000 RMB a month, because that's sort of the market value with the accommodation around the school I am currently at. But again, in my previous international school, before this one, they only offer 5,000 RMB a month accommodation allowance, because that was sort of the market value around the school that I was working in before. I hope that this gives you some idea on the salary range you could expect to get teaching in China, and sort of things that you need to consider about how much money you can save and how much money you can spend. In my opinion, I never worked in big cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and I'm glad I never worked in those big cities, because if I did, I knew I wouldn't be able to save as much money as I do now. It's better to work in these regional cities. In Wuxi and Changzhou, in a tier 3 city I worked in, I was able to get relatively high end of the salary range, but the cost of living so much lower. And if I wanted to travel to Shanghai, it was only a 1 hour high-speed train ride away. So I can always go for a weekend trip to Shanghai if I wanted to. I think that something you need to consider as well is cost of living. Don't just look at the salary packages overall. Also consider how much it's going to cost you to live in the city, and that will determine how much money you'll be able to save. From my personal experience, I was able to save more than 50% of my salary each time. What I do, every time I got paid, I immediately took the more than 50% of my salary, put it in another bank account, and I never touched that one. That's how I was able to sort of grow my savings and eventually buy our own property with my wife in Changzhou. I can do another video about buying property in China. But overall, I hope to give you some idea on how much money you can make teaching in China. If there's any other topics that you want me to talk about living and teaching in China, please let me know in the comments. I'll do my best to make a video and upload a video when I can. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye bye.